What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Tide Talk. Sorry for the late start. We were experiencing some video issues. Our stream was not going live on YouTube. I think we finally got it all figured out. Just a reminder, each episode is available on YouTube. And if you're watching now, please take a second to subscribe to our channel and click that like button on this video. You can also find us on your favorite podcast applications like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you listen on one of those, we'd really appreciate it if you took a minute to leave us a 5-star rating and a short review, as it helps more people find our podcast. Crack a beer, cozy up. This is the away end, one of my favorite episodes that we do here on Tide Talk. I'm your host, Matt. Tonight I'm joined by my good friend Ryan, and we have Lawrence from the 901 Soccer Pod in the virtual studio to preview RIFC's midweek match at Memphis 901 FC. It's been a pretty wild 24-ish hours since we last sat in here and unveiled our rebrand as Tide Talk, but I wanted to give a massive shout out and thank you to everyone who took some time to reach out and talk to us about the change and how much they like it. People are digging the new logo. Hopefully we get our tech issues straightened away with since the relaunch here. I don't know what happened and why we weren't able to go live. A big special shout out to Craig from the RIFC Club Collector app who got our new logo out there and in packs. I gave him a lot of extra work today and he went above and beyond to deliver. If you're not already using the RIFC Club Collector app, click the link in this episode description. Get on the site. And for everyone waiting for this drop, go enter the code Tide Talk. That's Tide Talk, all one word, to get a free pack added to your collection. As I mentioned, I'm joined by Ryan. It's been a short time since we were sitting here looking at each other on screen. Ryan, how's it going, my friend?
Good. Long time no see.
Very, very good. We've got Lawrence from the 901 Soccer Pod. Lawrence, sorry. Thank you for bearing with us and getting through these technical difficulties to get started. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your podcast, where they can find you, what got you started on it, and what keeps you in it.
Yeah, so as you can see right there, I'm on Twitter at LDoc93. I also run the account for the 901 Soccer Podcast, which you can find at 901 Soccer Pod. Of course, you can find it on all of the everybody's favorite, whatever your podcast go-to platform is, you could probably find it there. We're also on YouTube. I'm part of the Bluff City Media umbrella, or empire, if you'd like.
There you go.
I like that.
Newish media startup here in Memphis. It's nice to be known as the go-to guy for soccer in a city. So that is a little bit cool. But yeah, you can find Bluff City Media on Twitter at @BluffCity_media, the YouTube channel. Obviously, it's not just Memphis 901 SC stuff. Even on the soccer side, I did cover plenty of the University of Memphis men's and women's teams this past season. And so I've been covering Memphis 901 FC basically since day one. The 901 Soccer Podcast actually predates Memphis 901 FC. This guy named Scotty started it way back in the NPSL days of Memphis City FC. And following the 2019 season, I had gotten credentialed for the 2019 season and would live tweet the games and then record a post-game podcast with my gut reaction, immediate thoughts. Some of it was research, some of it wasn't. And so he stepped away from it after the 2019 season, and then I was a one-man band flying solo from 2020 all the way through the end of the 22 season, and then Bluff City Media brought me on at the start of 2023. So I've been doing it ever since. I've also been a referee for 17 years, and I've also been writing for World Soccer Talk for about a decade now. So I've been around the game for a minute.
So when you first told us about you being an official off air, the first thing I had to ask you was, how do you rate the officiating in the USL Championship as a whole?
I knew you were going to ask that question.
Well, here's I'm a little bit biased.
Sure.
So I am the guy that is always looking for reasons to support the referee. It also happens that I actually know several of the USL referees personally, having worked with them in the past. They were both better and more dedicated to it than I am. One of them was actually voted USL Referee of the Year 2 or 3 years ago. By and large, the refereeing in the USL Championship is pretty good. Officials are prone to having bad games, much the same way that players are prone to having bad games. I would count myself among that. I've had. I wouldn't go as far as saying a shocker before, but I've missed some stuff. But every so often, if you want to go back and rewatch the episode of the 901 Soccer Podcast that I did following our second game of the season against Indy 11, I spent a fairly lengthy amount of time decrying the poor officiating in the game. So this is not me just being a homer. I can be like, hey, this isn't now, and it's the little things that I guess maybe the average fan wouldn't know to look for.
Yep.
They just know that we had two players shown red cards, and we lost the game, so nobody's real happy about that. But there was other stuff that I didn't like. That one thing that you noticed as an assistant referee, if you know which way you're going before the ball goes out, you move your flag from one hand to the other so that you can go up at the same time as the center. Well, in this particular game, the AR had his flag in his right hand, waiting to go up this way, and the center said, "No, we're going that way." So he had to change on the fly and go up like that. So that was just one of those little things that I was like, "This crew's not on the same page. We're having problems today."
And aren't you supposed to do it like behind your back too? You're not supposed to do it in front of you. Is that a thing?
No, you just
Okay.
no.
I took soccer referee class like 25 years ago, so I might be very wrong.
You do it just below. You do it below your waist.
Yeah. Okay.
Just and that way, hopefully before the ball has gone out, so that you don't start to go up and then have to like change hands. And that's something that's going to be worked out at the youth level when you're doing your local tournament. I see somebody in the chat says, "Have you pointed at your whistle?" That's like, "Hey, I got my whistle. This is how we're gonna restart play. So you don't go until I blow the whistle."
We saw a very long extended point at the whistle last match multiple times by the match official. So it was pretty infuriating that it was all eyes on him. It seemed it was very much.
That's I got that sense that second game of the season against Indy. I kind of got the. I think the point that I made was maybe he's got somebody here to, like, from wherever some family member that never gets to see him work is here, because like he gave his first yellow 7 minutes into the game for dissent, which I thought was hilarious because he walked over there and gave the dude the yellow, and the guy's like, "What?" And he went like this. Yeah. I thought it was hilarious, but because it was for the Indy player, but that should have been a red flag. But by and large, there's most of the time. There was one game last year where an opposing coach was dismissed, and because he kind of wanted to, I don't know, get into a pissing contest and show that he was bigger than everybody else, it took him a while to actually leave after he'd been shown the red card.
Boy.
And so they added a bunch of time back on, and 901 FC scored to win the game, and actually ran into that particular referee several months later after I had recapped that specific incident, and he was like, "I agree with your assessment of that situation."
That's perfect. Yeah. So I guess building on, you're talking about one of the games earlier in the season. Can you just give us a bit about Memphis' season so far? I see you guys sit 8th in the West. Recent form is draw, loss, win, draw. Can you talk a bit about the season so far and how it's met the expectations of the supporters?
So I was really high on this team coming into this season. I think part of that stems from the fact that I hadn't usually been particularly high on them in previous seasons. A lot of that probably stemmed from what I and others believed was, I don't know, not great decision making by the front office. Wait until the last minute, not letting. There was 1 year, I don't remember which season it was. It might have been 21 or 22, where we were like a week out from the start of the season, and there were only like 10 players on the roster.
I've heard you play
with
at
least 11 to play. So, no, but they had a really, really, really good offseason, both in terms of who they were able to keep, guys they brought in, how early they started on getting those people brought in. I mean, they started announcing stuff in November. They did a really good job this offseason. One of the themes was we're not necessarily looking for, we're looking for guys that want to be here and that have high quality character. It's like in the movie Miracle when Herb Brooks says, "I'm not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the right ones." Mm-hmm. That's kind of the way I kind of synced it up. And so they started the season off with a win over the Las Vegas Lights, which was not surprising because the Lights until this year have been just bad forever. Like they're like,
hey, that's our only win. Be nice now.
They go through a new manager every year. They're dropping cash out of helicopters to get people to go to games, and even that doesn't work. That's a real thing, by the way. They did that.
Okay.
Like at halftime, they had like everybody run out on the field. We're going to fly a helicopter into the stadium and throw money out, and everybody runs and goes and gets it.
That's wild.
That's a real thing that they
It's
did.
unbelievably Vegas.
But then after the season opening win, there was a rough patch, and it was 5 straight losses, and I wasn't sure if I was just, there's the sunken cost theory where you spent so much time and emotional capital invested in something that you can't. It's too painful to admit that maybe this isn't right.
Yeah.
I was almost there, but you looked at it, and they weren't playing bad. They were playing pretty well in just about every one of those games. The first half of the Indy 11 game really probably being the only exception to that. Maybe they were able to use the U.S. Open Cup to get a little bit of, they won their first game in the Open Cup, got a little bit of juice to kind of get the wheels turning, and then they went down to Birmingham at the end of April and beat the brakes off of them. I mean, they jumped on them early in like the 3rd minute. They had a second before the 20th minute, and they hit a third in the second half. And it maybe could have even been 4 or 5 because they had Birmingham chasing shadows. And that kind of things took off. They went on a 5-match unbeaten run. They beat the Rowdies here in Memphis 4-1. They got a draw in there somewhere. They beat Pittsburgh here at home, and they went and got a last-minute winner at El Paso. They got El Paso's coach fired. And El Paso didn't even do we're going to wait till the next day. No, like 2 minutes after the game was over, they're like, goodbye, fired. So things got back on track. And one of the points that he's an assistant coach and the assistant sporting director, Caleb Patterson Sewell, had been making is like, there's no panic. Nobody's down. We're playing well. Look, bad teams don't create. They were top 5 in the league in chances created. He's like, bad teams don't create this many chances. And I thought about it, and I was like, that makes sense. They're creating a lot of chances. And it's not necessarily that they weren't finishing them. There were a multitude of factors. There were suspensions. There were injuries. There was stuff like that. And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? He's right. Bad teams don't create this many chances. Bad teams are just bad. Like they just, very, very rarely do you have somebody that's way down the bottom of the table. And it's like, man, if you just got 1 or 2 bounces, you'd be all the way up here. No, so that 5-match unbeaten run, they were playing every bit as well as they had during that five-game losing streak. And they just finally got some bounces to go their way, and they stuck with it. And I think the players deserve a lot of credit for that, and the coaches deserve a lot of credit for that, because I had this conversation with Stephen Glass once upon a time where I'm very, very much prisoner of the moment. When things are going well, hell yeah, we're never losing again. We're winning it all. Let's go. And when things aren't going well, we stink, blow it up, get rid of everybody. Nobody's good. Fire everybody. And so I am both proud of the team and proud of myself for being able to kind of maintain during the highs and lows of the season thus far. So I think maybe they could and maybe should be a little bit higher in the standings. Maybe 1 or 2 bounces. This past weekend against Colorado Springs, they had 27 shots and only were able to put 1 of them away. I think that one they had to. They ran into a keeper that was just on one, who was like 6, something absurd like 6'10" or something like that. And there were maybe 3 or 4 shots from 1 or 2 of the players from way outside of the box that they were going in and they were going to be goal of the week. And he used every bit of his 6'10" to get there and get it out over the bar for a corner kick. So,
I caught the highlights of that one. There was some, like Tim Howard standing on his head against Belgium.
Tim Howard, now that you mentioned that, is the sporting director here at Memphis 901.
Look at that segue.
One of our team members, Scott, is in the chat tonight. He wants to know, did bad teams get to the point just before creating good chances? Because that seems to be what we are as RIFC. And he put, please say yes. So,
well, here's what I'll say about that. I did happen to look and notice that things aren't going so great for Rhode Island this year. But I'll say it's year one.
Sure.
Year one for Memphis 901 FC was not great. It's a little bit different than what 901 FC did to start this season. Memphis 901 FC in 2019 started. It took forever to win their first game. I mean, I think they got into like the end of April, maybe middle of May before they won their first game in that inaugural season. But they were creating a ton of chances, hit the post, cleared off the line, stuff like that. And at the end of the day, they were alive mathematically for the playoff race going into I think the end of September or maybe early October. And then they had been in playoff mode for a month and a half and just ran out of gas and got mashed every game down the stretch. So I don't know if that's going to make that one viewer feel better or worse, but I say that all to relate that it is year one. I do understand what it is that you guys are going through.
Yeah, it's funny that point you made about like we just need to go and get like a big win and like get out of there so that we can keep rolling. Like there is some belief in our supporter, group that like we just need that one like defining blowout win to just like push on for the season. I don't know if there's I don't know if there's optimism to get that, but yeah.
Big shout out to David Irons in the chat, finally able to make it. Really excited up the Tide. Awesome. Thank you for joining us, David. Really appreciate that. Lawrence, one section that we do regularly on our podcast on the post-match reactions that we do is the good, the bad, and the ugly. So could you hit us with a good, a bad, and ugly moment from Memphis' season so far?
Good. I touched on it already. Good moment was the win at Birmingham. I think that's really kind of what kick-started. I think that was the beginning of Memphis 901 FC looking like what we all thought and perhaps knew they could and should look like. You go 3-0 on the road in a place. Memphis at Birmingham has traditionally been a nightmare, a house of horrors. We had never won at Protective Stadium even before Birmingham moved in there, even when it was on like the campus of UAB. It was things did not go well. It was I think maybe we had one win there, but we had like 7 losses. It was not good. So the good is the Birmingham game. The bad, the first half of the Indy game. Like I said, you get somebody sent off, you give up 2 goals. And then the ugly, we had a home game against Orange County in mid-April. And it was kind of a nondescript, forgettable game. And out of nowhere, Orange County dropped 2 goals in what felt like a minute. And I think officially in game time, it was 3 minutes, but in time of actual ball being played, because, got to score the goal, got to go hang out with the boys down by the corner flag, and then you got to saunter back across. And so you're burned a minute and a half of celebrating. So it was 3 minutes of game time, but it wasn't but a minute of actual game play. And it was one where you got hit and you got stymied, and before you could even figure out that you had been hit, you got hit again. So I'll say that was the ugly. But good Birmingham win, bad Indy 11 loss, ugly 2-minute stretch in the Orange County game.
Perfect. Yeah. So keeping with our using our segments in this show, another one that we do is called RIFC in 3. So we reach out to our fans. They give us great insights on just these 3-word summaries of matches. Could you give one for Memphis' season so far, or even your support for the team?
Season so far, 3 words. About as expected.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more. I noticed the crazy thing is in the West, there's like 2 points separating 3rd from 9th. Yep. It's tight. It is. And also some of the I just happened to look at it this morning. The tiebreakers are strange because there are several teams on the same number of points as Memphis 901 FC that have substantially worse goal difference, but are ahead of them. But I don't understand. We haven't played some of those teams, so I don't know how they could be ahead of us based on head-to-head matchup. I don't know if this is something new or if I never paid attention to it before, but it's stick with what you know has worked for the last 50 years, right? Points, 3 for a win, 1 for a draw, none for a loss. First tiebreaker, goal difference. Second tiebreak, goals scored.
We looked into this because there was a point where us and our rival Hartford should have been above them, but we all kept being like, it's goal differential. Why aren't we above? And I can't remember what the tiebreaker was, but it was not any of the things that you would expect.
So, I mean, they could theoretically be as far up as 3rd, but I'd say overall about as expected. Maybe not the way we thought we would get here, but I mean, like I said, I was high on the team coming in, and then it got rough there for a minute, but then it got really good. And it took a loss in San Antonio, and then Colorado. So at one point, we going into that San Antonio game, we were the hottest team in the league, 5 games unbeaten with 4 wins and a draw. And then Colorado Springs, that came to town this past Saturday, they were the hottest team in the league. They'd won 5 straight, but they had gotten off to just a horrendous start. And so I think to go down a goal real early against Colorado Springs and come back and really be the better team the rest of the game. And I think that speaks to the character that Coach Glass and Coach Caleb said they were looking for in their players this offseason. Because there have been some moments this year where, you know, if that locker room wasn't as tight as it is, and if the players didn't have the right mentality, it could have spiraled real quickly. But they stuck with it. They kept believing in what they were doing, and we're back in the playoff places.
Sure. Shifting gears a little bit, can you talk to us a little bit about the stadium atmosphere? What's the attendance like? What's the supporter culture like? You know, what does the match day environment feel like?
So, the supporter group that we got is the Bluff City Mafia, and they know what they're doing. They put on a good show. They're there for the games. They're there. They're pre-gaming right around the corner. So if there's anybody from Rhode Island that is happening to make the trip for a Wednesday game here in Memphis, go hang out with them either before or after the game at the Brass Door. They'd be more than happy to have you. Brass Door is just a block from AutoZone Park. It's got a big giant clock out front with like an analog clock with the so the supporters is that we got a good group, I would say. Overall atmosphere is attendance has gotten worse every single season. And pre-cut, and I am loath typically to blame issues of today on COVID because that got real old real fast.
Sure.
But I don't think there's any other organization sporting organization in this town that got hit harder by COVID than Memphis 901 FC because they had momentum going into that 2020 season. They opened up the season with Indy 11 and had I think the largest crowd in team history, which is still the largest crowd in team. They got like 8,600 people there for it because they had announced Tim Howard was going to be playing, and he played for 901 FC that year. And then COVID hit. And so it's been teetering. Last year was the lowest in team history, like 3,400 a game. And it hadn't been great so far this year, but here's what I'll say. One of the issues, and I wrote, if you go to my Twitter, go to at LDoc93, my pinned tweet is the article that I wrote for Bluff City Media at the end of last season detailing the issues with the attendance, what the people think the problems are, and what they think the solutions to those problems are. And a lot of it was lack of marketing, lack of exposure. We don't see, we don't know. There's none of that. They have started here this season. They created a new position and hired Jay Mims to be the new COO. He was previously the head coach at Union Omaha. He got when Memphis 901 FC hired him this offseason and back in December. That move got a thumbs up from former Nebraska and current Texas A&M athletic director Trev Alberts. Almost blanked on his name there because he had known Jay for some time. So that's positive. But a lot of the stuff they have done, they have had better benefits for the season ticket holders. If you were a season ticket holder, you got we had a home open cup game. You got in for free. They gave out, cool. They had a season ticket holder event for the jersey reveal this year. They handed out a bunch of magnet schedules, which I grew up everywhere you went, you got a magnet schedule. And then that's something that just in the last 7 or 8 years just kind of went away. So, you know, Brent, I've got one on my fridge at home. There's one at my parents' house. There's one at my office. There's one at my fiance's parents' house. You know, I went ambush marketing ploy with it. So that was good from them. They have been doing a really good job. They did 4 or 5 appearances at some of the local schools in Memphis. They had an open practice out at the big complex we've got here, and everybody, it's open to attend. They had merch for sale. You could do drills with the players. You could take pictures with the players. You got either free or discounted tickets for the following Saturday's game. They just had a free coaches clinic this past weekend where youth, high school, or college coaches, they brought in a guy named Diogo Teixeira from Sporting Lisbon, who's their youth sporting director, to come in and speak. Coach Glass spoke. I did not get to go to the morning part of the event where they were in the auditorium and then had a field session. But after the game, Stephen Glass came up and spoke to them, and I was in there for that. And that was a really neat, really cool little peek behind the curtain, I guess you could say, where, he would explain why we play this way. We're not going to, one thing that I absolutely loved, it says, we're not going to change our formation or our tactics so that we don't lose. In essentially like, well, this team does this. What are you going to do to stop them from doing that? And I thought it was a real winner's mentality. I thought, say, we don't care what they're going to do. We're going to make them stop us and make them stop what we do, which I thought was just fantastic. So they've been doing a lot better at getting out into the community. There's been more coverage from the local media, which, last season, more often than not, I was by myself in the press box. There were, I shouldn't say that. It was me and one other guy, a guy named John Varlas, who covers high school sports for the Daily Memphian, has also been the Daily Memphian's 901 FC guy. But if it wasn't the two of us, it wasn't anybody. So there's been a little bit more on that front from the local media, like the Channel 3, Channel 24. They do the midweek media availability. They shoot some stuff out at training every week. Sometimes they're there for the game, sometimes they're not, but it's going to take time to get the attendance back up to what it used to be and what it needs to be, because you're essentially having to undo several, maybe 3 to 4 years worth of neglect.
Yep.
And that's not going to happen overnight. And I think what we've seen these last 2 games, each of the previous 2 games have had a higher attendance than the game prior to it. I don't know that I anticipate that for this game against Rhode Island because it's a Wednesday.
Yep, sure.
But they're doing the right things, and it looks like they're starting to trickle up. I don't expect that it's going to go to get back to 6,600 people a game this year. But with the summer soccer that we've got, with the Euros during the day, Copa America here at night, and all of that, and then both U.S. teams in the Olympics for the first time since 2008. I think people will take notice of that, and the crowds will get better. You combine that with the fact that they have been busting their ass trying to get more people to the games. I think long term it'll pay off. It's just right. Going to have to take some time.
You got the World Cup right around the corner on U.S. soil too, so hopefully that just kind of helps the USL as a whole.
Yeah, the Club World Cup's here next year. Sure. And then you've got there's still several USL teams alive in the U.S. Open Cup. So in theory, I'm sure if a USL team were to win the U.S. Open Cup this year, they would change the rules on who gets into the Club World Cup.
Oh, of course.
But there's the pathway for a USL team to make the Club World Cup exists. As cool. Insane as it sounds, and as unlikely it is to ever happen, it's like Dumb and Dumber. I'd say 1 in a million.
There you go.
But that pathway exists. But Copa America here this year, Club World Cup next year, World Cup in 2026, Olympics in 2028 here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the attendance stuff, because it's something that we, as like a supporters group and as kind of like the initial fans of this club, we talk about and are always worried about, because we want to just continue to see this club grow and grow and grow. So I'll definitely have to check out that article you wrote a few years ago, because
we'll retweet it on our accounts too. So you guys can listen and watch and check it out.
That is the one thing I've noticed. You guys are doing better than us on attendance. You're getting like 4,100 people a game, I want to say. What's the stadium capacity up there? Like 5?
Yeah, we're playing at a college campus right now, so it's around either 5 or 5,500, I think.
Okay, so 4,100. That's pretty close
bad
to gangbusters.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting next year with we're gonna have our own stadium where I think it's a 10,000 capacity. So that's where it really will be interesting to see how much more people.
That's the thing that year 2, we can here in Memphis, we can say that it was gonna be X, Y, and Z based on that first game, but with year 2, you just never know.
Sure.
I mean, you see it happen in MLS all the time. That's why it's basically a Ponzi scheme, because once the new wears off, the attendance tanks, and you have to add new to get those numbers back up in the new city. And then once the new wears off, it goes back down, and just rinse, repeat.
Absolutely. So Lawrence, turning our attention to the upcoming game, I know our fans are going to be really excited for this one. Wednesday night, a little bit different than our normal routine, but I know people will be out in force. Come see the Defiance at the Guild. We'll all be there. But one thing when we talk about the game is we'd love to ask, who are 3 players to watch from Memphis that people should either know or be aware of?
So, yeah, that is the biggest one. Two of the guys are were on absolute fire in May. Marlon Santos is up for Player of the Month for the month of May in the whole league. He had something dating back to the Birmingham game at the end of April. I think in that 5-game unbeaten streak, he had like 5 goals and 5 assists. Like he was a man possessed. And one of the beneficiaries of that is another guy that you guys should keep an eye on is Bruno Lapa.
Yep.
If it wasn't Marlon, it was Bruno. Is really kind of the way that the month of May went. And then the third guy, you could pick several. I think under the radar, I'll give you every sport has that guy that does all the dirty work that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. And that guy is Zach Duncan for Memphis 901 FC. He is originally Australian and does speak with just the most wonderful Australian accent you've ever heard in your life. And funnily enough, one of the new local media people here at Channel 24 is also from Australia. And so at the media availability last Thursday, they had a little bit of back and forth about some Aussie, I think it's Aussie ribs, Australian sport of some kind. I don't know what the teams they were discussing or what the sport was, but it was kind of a funny little inside joke between the two of them, I thought.
It'll be fun. We have our backup keepers from Australia, so maybe there'll be a little,
I'm sure they'll get pictures after the game type deal. He's one that he's kind of he and Emerson Hindman in the midfield. That's a name that's kind of a blast from about 2015. If you paid attention to the U.S. national team at that time, he was one that was always on the fringes of because his dad or his granddad used to be the coach at FC Dallas, and he got into the national team scene under Jurgen Klinsmann, and it just never panned out for him for whatever reason. But Emerson Hindman and Zach Duncan in the midfield for Memphis 901 FC that was something that Coach Glass elaborated on this past Saturday after the game. That was just like, they get along really well. They play very well together. A lot of stuff goes through them, and they make good things happen out there. So Marlon Santos, Bruno Lapa, and then you can take your pick between Zach Duncan or Emerson Hindman.
Sure. To kind of piggyback off that, our good friend Nate always asks in the chat, who is your super sub or super subs? I know this is like formation dependent or who's starting versus who's not dependent, but who is one player that can really come on and influence a match late on?
My theory, my opinion, is that we've got a guy named Dylan Borsak. He's number 77.
Yep.
Every time he comes on as a substitute, I feel like something happens. It's always like 75th minute or later, and it might not be a goal, but it'll be like he's only got 1 goal on the season. This is not to question tactics or coaching decisions or anything like that. There's only so much, 901 FC has traditionally always had a very small roster. So I guess it's lucky in that way that, you've only got so many guys to choose from. And, this Wednesday is going to be the second of 3 games in 8 days. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure it might look different than what it looked like this past Saturday. But Dylan Borsak started this past Saturday. But I have always liked him in that super sub type role. I don't know that he necessarily likes himself in that super sub role because you want to play and you want to get more minutes because you've got more chance of scoring goals. But, there have been times both last year and this year where I've like when he's come on, I've like good things are about to happen.
Sure. You mentioned the small squad. We did have a question earlier in the chat that kind of ties in nicely with that. Can you talk about how many players you tend to lose per season to transfers or just due to the short nature of USL contracts?
That's what I was going to say. It's much more a situation where it's kind of just the nature of the beast in the league. There's going to be a lot of turnover on the roster just because, most of these teams can't pay players a whole lot. So if somebody like Louisville comes calling, you're going to go there. Or we had a situation here after the 2022 season where Ben Pierman was the coach of the year and left to go to the Charleston Battery and took half the team with him. And there were 2 guys on that team, and the organization and I have butted heads several times. Sometimes I've been right, and sometimes I've been wrong, and sometimes they've been right, and sometimes they've been wrong. I was really hard on the team when Ben left. I was not super happy about that. During one of the preseason games this year, I had a chance to sit and chat with Pete Pranica, who is the commentator for the majority of the games here. Also is the TV play-by-play voice for the Memphis Grizzlies. So
Cool.
I was chatting with him, and he was like, "Yeah, Steven walked into a tough situation here with, the club said we're keeping these guys, and those guys at the time were Philip Goodrum and Aaron Malloy, and you can kind of read between the tea leaves and the theme for this offseason about we want guys that want to be here, and hearing that maybe it was a tougher situation than you would have expected, considering how successful Memphis was in 2022. And you're like, okay, I think you can kind of read between the lines and see who they thought that maybe the issues were, that who didn't necessarily want to be here. And you found out real quickly that Philip Goodrum was one of those guys, because he straight up said, I wanted to go to MLS. And then in the offseason, Aaron Malloy leaves and goes to Charleston to be with Ben Pierman again. So there's going to be a fairly high amount of turnover just about every year. But I liked the guys they were able to keep from last year and bring back this year. One of whom is Leston Paul, who is, you'll be interested to know, was on the field for Trinidad and Tobago on that fateful night in 2017 down in Kawaba. And he is a Memphis 901 FC original. He is the last player still here from the debut season in 2019. He hadn't played a whole lot this year. They're kind of transitioning him into like a mentor coaching type role. He has gotten on the field several times, but he's one that's been here through the thick and the thin. And so I think probably there were 8 to 10 guys that were on last year's team that are on this year's team.
Cool. It's gonna be interesting to know, as someone who's followed more of the American style of sports where people are on very long contracts. You kind of fall in love with people and you see them for a long time, and that'll be very interesting the next few years to get used to kind of the really high turnover. And
I feel like every team has their one or two guys.
Yep.
Louisville is the gold standard for that. I swear everything they touch turns to gold. They've never not been to the conference finals. They've got the best stadium in the league.
Yep.
They've got an NWSL team. I was fortunate enough. I got to cover. They got to host the College Cup, the NCAA, the semifinals and national championship game, and I got to cover that. So that was pretty cool. But they've got one or two guys. Memphis has Leston Paul. You can flip around through several organizations throughout the league who have guys that have been there for quite some time.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah. So as we kind of get towards our score predictions, and as Matt just typed in, get those in the chat for us to talk about, we wanted just to get your quick keys to the game here. So this is a two-parter. So if Memphis were going to win this game, what do you think would happen? What were the keys to the game? And if Rhode Island were to take some points back home east with us, what do you think would have happened there?
It's maybe going to sound just a little bit homerish and almost a little bit coach speak.
That's why you're here.
But that's just one of the things that Stephen Glass has kind of preached, is we're not really worried about what other teams are going to do. We're focused on ourselves and making sure that what we do is the best that we can do it. Mm-hmm. And I think if that holds true, and I haven't seen anything to suggest that they wouldn't stick to what they've done all season, because that's I think the reason they were able to get out of that early hole is because they stuck with what they knew was going to work. And I think the Memphis 901 FC that we've seen for the last month is a much truer version of what they are than what we saw the first part of the season. So if they just stick to what they've been doing, if Marlon continues to play well, if Zach and Emerson in the midfield continue to link up well, going down the right-hand side has proven fruitful for Memphis 901 FC. Carson Von Stieg is a defender, and he was, I made sure in the most recent post game to give him his flowers, because he was getting forward and making things happen against Charleston, against Colorado Springs last Saturday. So I think if they stick with what they know, and you combine that with the fact that let's be real, Rhode Island is having a tough go of it, mm-hmm. and I think this probably should be a comprehensive Memphis 901 FC win. I'll say maybe either 3-0 or 3-1. I'll say 3-1. It's more goals is more fun. We'll say 3-1.
All right. That was the next question, was their score prediction. So you're in there with.
I saw the chat was blowing up with it, so
you're good.
might as well give the people what they want.
we'll take a few to go through the chat. Our guy Nate has 1-1. Scott has 4-1. Kano would have to be giving the lads the hair dryer treatment, scare the life out of them. JJ is walking home if he doesn't put one in the back of the net. Thank you to our guy Archie who just hit that subscribe button. He's got an awesome channel as that just popped up on the screen.
Cool.
There's got 0-0 Draw King, sadly. So that's a local nickname for RIFC. Lawrence is because of the rate.
A lot of draws.
So even though we were down late, there was a 90% chance we were going to come back and draw that game last weekend based on our form. But unfortunately, that did not happen. Jason's got 1-0 to the bad guys to Memphis.
I can live with that.
Tyler's got a personal rule that he cannot predict a loss.
I saw that, and one of my grand life philosophies is when it comes to sports betting, do not, under any circumstances, bet for or against teams that you are emotionally invested in.
Sure,
because
I should take that advice more often.
You are either going to talk yourself into it or talk yourself out of it based on how happy or how upset you are with your team. Like if things aren't going well, like I said, F this, these guys are terrible, we're losing 100-0. Bet it all on this other team, and then you pull out the win. Or like, man, we're playing awesome right now. This team stinks. There's no way they're going to beat us. Bet the house on us to win. Oops, So that's
it's good advice. That's sound advice.
My rule. Do not bet for or against teams that you are emotionally invested in.
Unless it's a draw for Rhode Island, I think you're pretty safe with that most of the time. Tyler says 0-0 feels optimistic after last week. Deezer says 2-2 Draw Kings. Kevin, who's going to be kicking off the Call Hog Corner in just under 30 minutes. So if you're watching this live, head on over to Twitter and follow Kevin, and we retweet all that stuff. So make sure you get in the Call Hog Corner and join him. Memphis 2, RIFC -1. That could definitely.
Does the -1 really just mean that there's going to be an own goal?
That could work. I could see that happening. Big shout out to William Lamb. He's a Sacramento FC vlogger who follows along and watches our show and interacts with us a lot. He's got 2-1 Rhode Island wins going against the grain there, William. We appreciate that. Matt Strick says 2-0 to Memphis. Love you, Kano, baby, but please change. Hopefully not changing in match, which we talked a lot about in our last one. But Tyler also added, totally agree, Lawrence. 2021 Celtics taught me that the hard way about the betting match.
The best lessons in life are learned the hard way.
That's it. Ryan, what do you got for your score prediction?
Oh man. So Lawrence, like you said, you should never bet on your team either way. I never bet on my team.
We're just giving score predictions. We're not putting real hard cash on this.
Well, I never bet on my team to lose. I unfortunately am going to predict us to lose this one. I was debating around 2 or 3-1 to Memphis. I'm going to go 2-1 officially. I think this is actually going to be the game where we really miss Jack Piniotu. So far, it seems like Memphis's biggest Achilles heel so far has been set pieces on defense. 20th in the league on expected goals against there. We saw the drastic difference in set piece delivery without Jack P this game. Lawrence, for your understanding, it was a guy we had on loan from the Revolution in the MLS. They called him back up for like cover for a couple games. So really, yeah, super brutal. Really missing him. Yep, 90 minutes on the bench, didn't play.
They need him. It's that fixture congestion that they spent all off season talking about.
Sure. Yep. But yeah, so I think as you point out earlier, Marlon and Lapa are going to be an absolute handful. I actually do have faith in Odarce and Yao. I gave them big ups last game, but I am worried about, as you mentioned, that kind of right winger position, especially if we do the thing where we're playing Turnbull and Clay and they're inverting and doing a lot there. So other big thing I'm worried about is second balls in this game. It seems like Memphis does a really good job with those second balls. They had a lot of trouble with a striker from San Antonio, who's just like a really big guy. And I can see JJ Williams giving a bit of the same trouble. But as we saw, we don't win those second balls that JJ is doing, which San Antonio did a much better job with. So I just think this could be tough. Maybe we get one on a set piece, but I do see this being a 2, if not 3-1 Memphis.
Well, that is how Colorado Springs scored this past weekend. Was on a corner kick. And then you mentioned
like 4 minutes into the game too, right?
Yeah, it was real early. So I think that was kind of, sometimes teams can maybe not necessarily be 100% dialed in to start the game, and then you give up the goal and it's like reset and you're like, okay, here we go. I think that's kind of what the case was. And overall, Saturday was kind of a forgettable game, to be perfectly honest. But you also mentioned, Memphis causing problems down the right-hand side. If it's not Lapa and Marlon, it's a third Brazilian. Luis Fernando. He's been a menace. I think he's only got 2 goals this season, but he got the goal this past Saturday. And it's, we've got 4 Brazilians on the team, and they all play really well together. And 3 of them are attacking, and they combine well. They pick out really good passes, and they are fast.
Awesome. So I guess it's my time. I'm gonna go 1-1. I think JJ gets his first goal. I think we put in a stout defensive shift, and we've kind of played up to our opponents in certain times. We've played down in others, and I think this is a make or break game. So this is, if we're able to go out there and pull out a draw, it's a very, very good result. So I'm gonna go 1-1. I'm not optimistic about it. I could see this going 3-4 in the favor of Memphis, but I'm thinking the boys kind of get it together. I think there's a players only talk that happens sometime between now and start of the match, and we kind of realize that Saturday was not good enough and nowhere near close to good enough. So hopefully we're able to put some things together. But I'm going 1-1. We'll see what happens.
If it makes everyone feel better in the chat, I'm usually dead wrong. So
sure,
who knows?
That's it. But I think that'll wrap things up for this one. Lawrence, thank you again for joining. Thanks for bearing with us with those technical difficulties. Everyone who made the stream.
It's all good, man.
I don't know what happened. We blame Kevin. Kevin came and infected our stream, so we'll scrub everything, make sure it get going. But if you're not already, go check him out.
It's always best to blame the person who's not there to defend themselves.
That's it. I'm sure he'll pop off in the chat or on our Discord, as it could be going right now. But thanks for everyone who kind of stayed with us throughout that. We'll get it all set up as we are still, going through some growing changes with the rebrand a little bit and getting all that figured out and sorted. But hopefully nothing more than just a minor blip in the radar. So that'll wrap things up for this one. Remember, Tide Talk is more than just a podcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook for daily social media content. There's a link in this episode description that you can click to follow all of our accounts. Really excited about this and what we have going on. Thank you again to Lawrence, and thank you to Ryan for joining, taking the time out. It's always fun to do these. I like learning about other teams, especially being a first-year club, and it gives our supporters something to kind of help learn about the league and learn about the other teams. So thank you for taking that time out again, Lawrence. We would definitely really appreciate that.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
I'll say the only bad take you had was that most of the refs in this league are good, because we've seen I think maybe we've just seen the poor ones. I'll give you that. But like you said, every dog has his day, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's you can't win for losing if you're a referee. Like there's
100%.
I mean, very, very rarely are you going to have a situation where everybody's just like, yeah, we lost, but man, that ref put in a hell of a performance today. That's not going to happen all that often.
That's it. Thanks for giving us a little bit more of a level head on that one. So we'll see you next time here on Tide Talk. Again, make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast applications and on YouTube and on Twitter and all those social media accounts. We'll get you all of your content fix covered. I've been your host, Matt, for my co-host, Ryan, and our special guest, Lawrence, here on the away end. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. And as always, up the Tide.
Up the Tide.